Now that we have added some markup to the sidebar, let's actually make it do something. Let's start by rendering the content component, because this is the component that is going to be responsible for displaying the appropriate view. So in the app.vue file, I first want to import the content component. So I'll just add the import. So I can just replace this with content. Just like that. And add it down here. So app content and the content object. And in the template, I can simply use the component like this by using the app content tag. Let's just have a look in the browser, refresh the page, and there we can see the content component being displayed now. So while it's being displayed right now, it doesn't really do anything. What we need is a way for our component to render the correct component dynamically based on which view we are on. Perhaps you remember the component tag from a previous lecture. We're going to be using this right now. So let's open up the content component. And to start off, I'll just quickly add some markup. So I'll add the component right here. And remember to make it dynamic, I'll use the is attribute with the vbind directive. And since I want to keep it alive, I'll wrap it within a keep alive tag. Just like that. But how do we know which component should be rendered? I will store this in a data property. But because we'll eventually need a way to navigate back from one view to another, I will add a history data property containing an array of objects. Each object will then contain the tag name of the component and the view's title. So I'll add the data function down here in the objects and return an object as we have to, and add the history data property. And like I said, this is going to be an array of objects, and I'll just add an initial object which contains information about the default component that is going to be displayed. So this will be displayed when we first render the page. The tag should be app-inbox, and the title will be inbox. But how do we refer to the view that should currently be displayed? This seems like a good time to use a computed property. So let's go ahead and add a computed object. And I'll add a computed property for the current view. And this is simply going to return the first index, i.e. index 0 of the history array. And then we can use this computed property within the template. So I'll just access the computed property here, current view.tag. So this is the tag name of the component that we want to display. And also I want to output the title of the currently active component. So current view.title. And let's now add the inbox component as a local component so that we'll be able to output it. So first the import inbox from the current directory and inbox.view. And as always, we're going to need a components key for the local component. And let's call it app inbox and inbox. And let's open up a browser. And this doesn't look quite right. So let's go back and see what we did wrong. Okay. I'll just move this part right here out of the inbox head element. Let's try again. And now we see the inbox component being rendered initially. And this is simply because this is what we have defined within the history data property. Obviously, it doesn't look good yet, but we'll get to that. Before implementing the logic that lets us actually switch between the views, we first need to add the other views as local components as well. So let's begin to do that. I'll just duplicate this line. And first the send component. And next the important component. And let's just do it like this. And trash.view and view message. And of course, register them in the components object. And actually, instead of you having to watch me type that out, I'm just going to copy it in because there's really nothing new for you to see here. All right. And now we need to actually be able to change which component should be output. So back to the app.vue file. When clicking a menu item, we need to somehow communicate between the sidebar component and the content component. And there are a couple of ways we can do that. We could trigger an event on the sidebar component and listen to this within the app component by using the vOn directive. Then we could store the new view within the data property and pass this to the content component by adding a prop and using the vbind directive. Another approach would be to use an event bus for triggering events whenever we click a menu item, and that's what I'm going to do. So let's go ahead and add an event bus, and actually this is going to be within the main.js file. So export constant event bus equals new view. And then we need to go within the sidebar component and add some click event handlers. So let's find the inbox link first. And I already have the links here. So click, and I'll use the prevent modifier. And then I'll refer to a navigate method, which I'm going to implement in just a moment. I'll pass the tag name as well as a title. Like that. And I'll just be lazy and copy this for the other links. And of course, replace these values accordingly. So app sent and sent. And for the important messages, app important and important. And lastly, for the trashed messages. Next, let's import the event bus. So import, and here I'll need to use the curly brackets because we're potentially exporting multiple objects or values within the main.js file. And from main. All right, and now for the event handler. So navigate, navigate. And the tag name here as the new view parameter and the title. And here I can just use the event bus and call the $emit method here, as you've seen before. I'll name this event change view and pass an object of data. In this case, I want to pass the tag, which is the new view parameter, and the title of the view. So title. Then within the contents components, I want to add a listener for this event. And I will do this within the created lifecycle hook. So created. And here I need to use the event bus. So I will just import that. Import event bus from main. All right, and use it to listen to change view events and add a callback with some data. And now I'll just store the new view that we're going to display into a temporary array named temp, containing an object with this new view. So tag, and I'll use the data object that has a tag key, and the same for the title. And then I'll need to set the history data property to temp, which is the array that I just added. And I see that I need an assignment here. And I'll access the history data property and splice this array. So what I'm doing here is that I'm basically inserting the new view at the first index of the history data property, and I'm taking all of the elements within the history array and I'm concatenating those. So the first index in the history array is going to be the new view, and then the rest of the elements are going to follow. So let's open up a browser, and we should now be able to switch between the views. And this doesn't actually work. So let's see. Of course, I forgot to nest this event handler within the methods key. That's a rookie mistake, but as you can see, it can happen. So let's go back, try again, refresh the page, and now we can switch between the views. So far, so good. However, the current view is not highlighted within the menu, so let's fix that. To do that, I'll keep track of the current view within a data property within the sidebar component. So let's add a data method. As always, returning an object. And add an active view data property. And I'll set it to the inbox initially. So how are we going to keep this data property updated? Well, I could just assign a new value to it in the click event handler, but I don't want to do that. The reason is that if I were to change the view from somewhere else in the application, then the property would not be updated. Therefore, I'll do something that may seem weird to you at first. Listen to the events that I have just triggered within the very same component. So, time to add a created lifecycle hook. And in here, I will use the event bus to listen to the change view events. So actually the events that I'm triggering below. And add a callback with some data. And in here, I will set the active view to data.tag. So this means that no matter how in the application the view is changed, this property will always be updated. Okay, now that we always know which view is active, we just have to use this data property to add the active class to the correct li element. So up to the template, let's remove this default class here and use the vbind directive together with the class attribute. Pass in an object here saying active, and the expression is simply going to be active view, being the data property, equals app-inbox. So if this is true, then the active class will be added. And now I'll just actually go ahead and copy this, paste it in, just to be lazy, and change this value. And last but not least, the trashed messages component, so app trash. And back to the browser, we should see that the correct view is now being highlighted in the menu when changing the view. With that being done, let's load some messages from a data file so that we can start adding some more interesting content to the application.